Okay. 6:04, calling this meeting to order. Mary, can you take a roll call, please?
Yes. Nina?
Here.
Nick?
Here.
John?
Present.
Lacey?
Here.
And Larry?
Present.
Thank you.
Everybody's here. Would you all please join me for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You all right? All right. Could you please pull up the agenda on the computer screen? Everybody have a chance to read the minutes for the last meeting? Oh, got it. Thank you. I got one over here. Wait, I have the second one, second meeting.
Here I go.
That's okay. While I'm just getting that for the minutes, everybody have a chance to read those? Any questions?
Oh, you've got two of them.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve those. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, skipping down to visitors, an opportunity to address concerns not on the agenda. A 4-minute time limit per speaker is allowed. No formal action may be taken, though the commission may place the topic on a subsequent agenda for future discussion and consideration. Anybody like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on down to the public hearing, the action items, Shrugs conditional use permit. So, fair part, I'll open the public hearing for the Scruggs, I apologize, conditional use permit. Let's see, address, appearance of fairness. So, really quick, anybody here have any ex parte communications about this or any financial gain for this? Can we all be fair and objective on this?
Yes.
If I can get everybody to say yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, moving on. Mr. Scruggs, would you like to present? Sure.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank each commissioner here tonight for giving me the opportunity to present regarding my CUP application. I'm here
Excuse
tonight.
me. We need to have you, I know that you're the applicant, but for the record, since it's being recorded, I need your name and your address, please.
Okay, no problem. My name is Jeffrey Scruggs, and the last name is Scruggs, and my address is 14913 North Pristine Circle in Rathdrum, 83858.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here tonight seeking conditional use permit approval for my residence located at 14913 North Pristine Circle to conduct a home-based business which will involve gunsmithing and firearm sales. This requires a federal firearms license issued by the ATF. The ATF requires either a business license or a city planning and zoning approval. Since the city of Rathdrum does not issue business license, I'm here tonight seeking the CUP approval. To some people, this might be a very scary proposal, especially when you're talking about gunsmithing and gun sales business being conducted from a residence. Some people might envision or have the impression of a big box gun stores and the fear that I might turn my home into one of those. I can assure you that's not going to be the case. I would not want that in my neighborhood either, and besides, it would never be allowed by the HOA. Before going into the business details, I would like to mention my background regarding firearms. I mentioned my background in the application narrative that probably most of you have read that's sent into the city, but I want to quickly go over it again for anyone here tonight regarding my CUP that has not had the opportunity to read the narrative. By doing this, it should eliminate the possibility of someone thinking that I'm just a guy that woke up one day and just decided to start messing around with firearms. First off, I grew up in the South. You probably picked up on that as soon as I started speaking. I was introduced to firearms at a very young age, probably just like everybody here in northern Idaho. Not a week went by where I wasn't either walking in some field or some woods with my little 410 shotgun shooting up a bunch of stuff. I'm also a military veteran where I served a combined active duty and reserve time of 10 years, where I gained immense firearms, weapons experience, not only with small firearms, but with larger weapon systems. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer of 33 plus years. During my 33 plus years as a in my law enforcement career, I served 18 years as a SWAT team member, and I was a SWAT Academy instructor. I attended several certified law enforcement armor courses, which taught me the skills to work on several types of firearms. I also served as division armor, where I maintained the department's guns, and for the last 10 years of my law enforcement career, I was a firearms instructor. I just wanted to mention this for anyone that had not had a chance to read the narrative or had questions. With all that being said, I currently have an existing small shop in the interior of my residence, just beyond my garage, where I already work on my own guns. The shop measures roughly 266 square feet of a 3,445 square foot house. So it makes it about a little bit less than 8% of the total residential living area. The shop was designed and built as a shop when the house was built, and I also have it up on the site map if anybody wants to take a look at it. Unlike some of the larger home-based businesses, my small part-time hobby-type gunsmithing and firearm sales business will not have any excessive foot or vehicle traffic, nor will it have any retail sales to the general public from my home. At most, a family member, friend, neighbor, or local customer will stop by on occasion or by appointment. 99% of my firearm sales would be conducted online through various gun buying and selling websites. And as far as firearm sales goes, my focus is to buy or acquire malfunctioning, broken guns that are not working or need restoration, repair them in my shop, and then sell them online. I will not have any employees, and I will be the only one at my residence who will be engaged in the business. I will not have any exterior business signs of any kind on or around my property. There will not be any structural changes made in or around my home or to any other part of my property. I will not carry a large inventory of guns or ammunition stored at my home or anywhere else on my property. As for shop noise, the noisiest tool I got in the shop right now is a small Dremel tool. Also, I will not be buying, selling, manufacturing, or reloading any ammunition. My proposed home-based business will involve light gunsmithing and the occasional special ordering of a few firearms for family and friends. As I mentioned earlier, my main business focus is to buy broken guns, repair them, and then sell them online. The business will be totally interior, non-disturbing to my neighbors, just as it is right now with my current work that I do on my own guns. By obtaining conditional use permit approval for my primary residence, it will allow me to acquire my federal firearms license, which will allow me to legally buy and sell and do work on other people's guns as a for-profit business. My future home-based business will comply and satisfy all 6 items listed in section 11-5-5, performance standards for specific land uses under subsection I, home occupation. And as for item 6, the inspection requirement is an open invitation to any official that wants to stop by and conduct an inspection or just check out the shop. With that, I would like to ask the board for approval regarding my request for a conditional use permit, and that's pretty much it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before you sit down, any questions from anybody here?
What are your planned operating hours?
It is a part-time, there might be days where I don't do anything at all, or if something comes in, I might work. For the ATF application, I did put 10 to 4, but that's mostly when they can come in, the hours that they would be able to come in and inspect the premise.
What's your storage plan for the few guns you do have? I know there's thieves around the place. I mean, it's North Idaho, Spokane, all that. you have a large enough safes or containment area for those?
I do have a space in my shop that if this is all approved and my FFL license is approved, I do plan on buying a safe to put in there. I just haven't got to that point yet because
Okay.
waiting on all this to go on, but I do have a space set aside and the safe will be, drilled into the floor and stuff like that.
Okay.
Does the ATF come and do inspections on that? They will come?
Anytime they want to. With the hours that I set, they can come in, a surprise inspection and make sure that all my books are correct and stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
James?
Thank you. This is my staff presentation regarding the conditional use permit for home occupation for Jeffrey Scruggs. You just heard Mr. Scruggs give his narrative and his information regarding this project. So Jeffrey Scruggs at 14913 North Pristine Circle here in Rathdrum. The property is identified in blue right there on that little map. There's the address again. Seeking a conditional use permit for a home occupation for the purpose of gunsmithing and firearm sales to be operated from existing shop space within the primary residence. As Mr. Scruggs mentioned, the real reason we are here is because the ATF needs city approval to give him that FFL. Because the city does not have business licenses, the only way we can approve of that home occupation is through this process. As Mr. Scruggs stated, no employees other than himself, no exterior signs or advertising, no structural changes to the interior or exterior of the residence, no additional storage interior or exterior required, no buying, selling, manufacturing, reloading of ammunition, no public retail sales, no machinery noisier than a Dremel tool, and 99% of the expected sales are to be conducted online. The property is located within the city's R1 zoning district. Home occupations are designated as a conditional use in that district as shown by RCC 11482. Right there, bed and breakfast, churches, guest houses, home occupations in blue. Yep. So these are the criteria for granting a conditional use permit under Rathdrum City Code 1183. A, will it constitute a conditional use as established for the zoning district? Yes, indeed. B, will it be harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives or any special objectives of the comprehensive plan? We're going to come back to B in a moment. C, will it be served adequately by essential public facilities and services? Absolutely, there's no additional requirement for any services above and beyond the single-family residence. Will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use will not change the essential character of the same area. We have no signs, no additional traffic, no parking for employees. Meets that one too. E, will not create excessive additional requirements as to the public cost for public facilities. Nope, no changes or additional requirements needed. Will not involve uses, activities, process, materials, equipment, and conditions of approval that will be detrimental to any person, property, or the general welfare. Again, there's no additional burden created by this application that could be determined to cause any detrimental effect anywhere. We'll have vehicular approaches to the property which shall be so designed. Again, there is no additional vehicular traffic or parking required. H, will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of a natural, scenic, or historic feature of major importance, unless there's something very exciting in his shop area already that none of us know about. There should be no effect there either. Going back to number B, being harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives of the comprehensive plan. Land use element. We should consider special use permits only where the proposed land uses can be demonstrated to be consistent with the goals. Yes, following that, water and sewer element, no additional burden. Housing element, no additional burden. Economic development element, we want to encourage local economic growth. So we're right along then. And that last one as well, encouraged home-based businesses where appropriate. So with the B, all of the requirements of the CP are met by this application. In conclusion, I have reviewed the whole of the record for this and any past proposals associated with the property, considered the comments received in relation to this project. There were 3 written comments submitted prior to this hearing. 2 were included in the staff report, and the 3rd was supplied in the packet because it was turned in after the staff report was prepared. In summary, this proposal is not likely to have any adverse impacts to adjacent uses or neighborhoods. And that is what I have.
All right. Any questions for James?
I like the PowerPoint, that was snazzy. Looking good.
Trying very hard over
Way
here.
better than.
This is the first meeting in a couple that I've had positive things said.
So my maternity leave was exciting, I tell you.
Very much so.
Dang.
Do we have any
You guys got any questions for James?
No.
Okay, moving on to the public portion. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak in favor of, and I have a list here, in favor of Rachel Hudson? Rochelle, I'm sorry. Will you state your name and address for the record?
Rochelle Addison, Rathdrum. We lost a lot of small businesses due to government
Can I get
interference.
your address, please?
Is that legally required?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, to know that you're a Rathdrum resident.
12735 West Winch Avenue, Rathdrum. We lost a lot of small businesses due to government interference during COVID-19-84. Small business is the backbone of America and needed for economic stability. We need to build our economic resilience back up by government stepping out of the way and letting small businesses proliferate. As inflation and more government interference makes it harder to purchase new firearms, more gunsmithing services will be needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, in favor, we have Mary from the Justice Department.
My name is Mary Swoboda. I live at near Majestic Park, and I'm not giving you a street address. I'm in support of this man being able to have this, I didn't even write any notes here. I'm in favor of what's going on, and a lot has to do with what happened in 2020 when people got stuck being at home, and a lot of people ended up having to create their own businesses, home businesses. That's what this man has done. I'm also very excited that there is a local gunsmith, because if I ever need something repaired, I would certainly call him and ask him to help me make my gun work again. So I don't have anything else to say. I'm just in support of what he's doing.
Thank you, Mary. Next, in favor, we have Sam Denton.
My name's Sam Denton. My address is 14890 Pristine Circle. I live right across the street from Jeff. I've been in his house, I've seen his proposed shop, I've met his family, true family man, and I do not see any problems with what he's proposing whatsoever. Just a nice guy, good family man, and old hobby, I think, anything for it, but I have no problems with that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Next, we have neutral, John Lamb.
My name is John Lamb. I live at 15468 North Pristine. I'm the president of the HOA. I have fielded a lot of calls on this. As the president, I represent 243 homeowners. In my HOA, I have all kinds of family-run businesses, from housekeeping, to metal welders, to you just name it. And we already have an FFL licensed person in our HOA. My job has been recently to educate our community on our CCNR's bylaws and Idaho state law. A lot of people are just confused. You know, they hear this proposal and the world goes crazy. You all know what I'm talking about, so I deal with it every day. In our CCNRs, there's only one code. It's section 8.2 in our CCNRs. And I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, no commercial use. No commercial use shall be allowed on any lot where there is an outward evidence of the commercial nature of the use, advertising signs, special lighting, extra parking, increased noise, or increased traffic. That is the take of the HOA. Now, I'm going to take my hat off for a minute, and I'm no longer speaking as the president of the HOA. I have served our country for 36 years on active duty. I've eaten dirt everywhere. I probably have been with him on Border Patrol missions in the past. I know him. He's the first person to volunteer to help our HOA out. I've met his family. I've met his kids. His character is outstanding. What his attempt to do is admirable. It's a hobby. He just retired. And so I am in full support of it personally. That's not my HOA hat, that's John Lamb's hat. And so unless there's any questions you have of the board, I will conclude that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any daycares out of your HOA area?
Yes, there are a few that are in the HOA. It is sporadic. We had one incident 3 years ago where it got too big and we had them get into our park area, and they have moved. But there is daycare after school stuff where people watch the kids. I have, like I said, I have welders in my HOA. I have contractors that work, they have their trucks parked. And what's cool about all of them is they volunteer. I have 27 volunteers in my HOA. You figure that one out. I have 6 subcommittees and they commit their time. There's no way my board could do their job without their efforts. I just did the budget. I have to run it all every year. We saved $34,000 just in the last 9 months because of our volunteers. And everybody knows everybody. We're getting a lot of new people, as you know, that are moving in from out of the area, and it's important to inform people. I send a blast out every month from myself, and I tell them, don't listen to hype, rumors, social media. Read your bylaws, read your CCNRs, understand Idaho state law. It's on all my websites. I put it out every month. Anybody in my HOA will tell you that. Trust me, they all know who my truck is. They all know where I live too. But yes, sir, and they are all in compliance. I did a CCNR drive-by yesterday, compliance visit with neighborhoods and stuff. And we're fortunate enough to live in a gated community. It's kind of the jam. It makes people feel good. They live in a gated community. 0 CCNR violations. We have 3 people that are delinquent by $150 in their dues. And if you can top that, you can have my job. Because it's the community. We have a wonderful community. And again, Jeff and I are friends. And I can't think of anybody better with a weapon than somebody with his qualifications. And I know weapons. So that's all I have to say. Any more questions, sir? Sir? Love your hat.
Thanks.
I gotta work on mine.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb.
Yes, sir.
Last speaker did not mark neutral or opposition or favor. Alicia Ray.
So, Alicia Ray, 15013 Pristine Circle. So what happens if he sells his home to that permit? Does that go with him? Is it done? Could they then put a daycare in? So what happens?
We will ask him in the rebuttal.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And just because that is the key here, right?
It's my understanding that an FFL license would go with the person.
No, I meant for
conditional
the,
use.
The conditional
correct,
use, okay.
that one.
Okay.
Sorry. So that's what because that's kind of the key, right? Is that, you know, we don't have daycares and things in the neighborhood because we want it to be residential. So that's kind of the key there. If it's out of sight, I don't know about it, I'm fine. But if there's traffic, all of that, that's the issue. So that's really what I want. I didn't know what it meant, so that's why I said I don't know.
Okay. We will get
Good question.
Yeah.
So,
I can answer that question for you.
okay.
Conditional use permits do indeed run with the land, but the conditional use permit at issue here is for gunsmithing in a 200 square foot room. That's the only thing.
Okay.
It wouldn't be good for a daycare when he sells it. It's
Okay.
just for the operation. So if the new owner chose to get an FFL and operate in that space, it would be allowed, but it doesn't automatically grant any other rights to the
Okay,
property.
because that was, when you put them all up there, I was like, I don't want anything else.
Right, no, that's what we're saying, it meets these requirements,
Okay.
those aren't there. But yes, a conditional use permit does run with the land. If you have a daycare that's authorized on your property, you sell it, the new owner can continue to run the daycare there, but they couldn't open a bakery. Right, it's specific to the use approved.
If they ask for an increase of area, would it have to come back for?
Absolutely, anything that is not authorized by the CUP itself would be required to come back to modify or get a new CUP for the change in terms.
So what
And
happens?
wouldn't he have to come back, the new owner would have to come back to get a conditional use permit with his name on it in order to get the FFL?
No, because the conditional use permit for the operation of a gunsmith at that location in that shop area runs with the land.
It's tied to the property itself, not
Okay.
to Jeff personally.
So what if there is a lot more traffic that it's not following that? What happens then? Can you deny it
That's
or-
my job.
No. So.
If they were in violation, if you
Yes.
started running a different business there, a complaint to code enforcement, we can shut it down.
Okay.
The only thing that is authorized by this CUP, if approved,
Okay.
is this specific use that we are discussing.
So code enforcement in a private community, how would that?
Is the private community within the city of Rathdrum?
Yep,
It is, technically, yes.
yep.
Code
That's-
enforcement in the city of Rathdrum.
Okay.
All property within the city has to follow the city code.
Good.
Okay, public comments are done.
We've missed the sign-up sheet here, so.
Okay, is that okay if we allow it?
It's up to the presiding.
Sure.
Okay.
Name and address, please.
My name is Kyle Ward. I live at 13661 North Pristine Circle. Here tonight to voice my concern about Jeffrey Scrigg's request for a conditional use permit for a home-based firearms business. My first concern is that Radiant Lake has an HOA. One thing that Mr. Lamb forgot to mention is Article 8, Section 8.1, which states in our governing documents that there is no residential lot should be occupied and used except for single-family residential purposes by the owner and his or her family or by a single-family tenant. Mr. Lamb is correct in the statement about 8.2 with no commercial use to be allowed in any lot. It also does say in there, extra parking, increased noise, or increased traffic throughout the project.
1 second, sir. The city here isn't here to enforce the CCNRs. Those are private-based covenants, so that would be an HOA requirement. That's not something that the city or planning and zoning can enforce or have anything to do with.
I understand that. My issue is that there is an HOA there which prohibits a home-based business like what Mr. Scruggs is proposing.
Again, sir, we can't address the HOA. We're looking at city code.
If I'm not mistaken, it kind of goes like
Hand in
your
hand.
An HOA rules
and
can
then-
be more restrictive than the city, but,
But they can't,
right.
if it's legal in Rathdrum, or Idaho state law, like, that's all more
No.
encompassing than a CCNR.
you guys can't take the CCNRs into account when you're making your decision, just the code.
Yes, so essentially, the HOA does not dictate to the city what to do, and the city doesn't dictate to the HOA what to do. We're only
Sort of.
kind of,
So
sort
The
of.
city is the big bubble,
Yeah.
the HOA operates within the city as a small bubble
Yeah.
within the city.
Meaning, we only deal with codes and the comprehensive plan. We do not deal with their CCNRs.
Correct.
That is
So
correct.
that's what I was trying to
Yes.
say.
Well, maybe he's bringing it home. Bring it home.
Yeah.
I'm not here to ask the city to enforce those covenants. I'm simply giving you the backstory of the HOA and the community that we live in. Those documents prevent those home-based businesses. I have a business as well, but I have to operate that business off-site somewhere else. So I don't know Mr. Scruggs personally. I'm a firearms enthusiast. I have nothing wrong with the business that he's proposed. It's simply in a private community like Radiant Lake. I was expected to operate my business off-site. If I was operating that business on-site, whether in inward or outward, presence of that, you'd be guaranteed that I would be contacted from those individuals. So again, I have no issue with him running a firearms business. It's just in the community of Radiant Lake. It's not permitted. So, it would be in violation of the covenants that all the homeowners agree to by living in Radiant Lake. And my concern is that it'll open the door for potential liability for the association, as well as sending an incorrect message to other residents that it's acceptable to operate your business from your Radiant Lake home. Mr. Scruggs' plan states that he will occasionally drop off and pick up by friends, family, or other local customers. But as with any business, once it is known that he has a firearms business there, it'll continue to grow, as will the customer presence inside Radiant Lake. My concern is increased traffic on our private roadway, excess wear and tear on our gate systems, as well as the potential liability for the association if a customer, family or not, were to slip and fall or otherwise hurt themselves on Radiant Lake property. For these reasons, I would encourage you to deny the conditional use permit. We're all paying members of an HOA in there. If someone were to slip and fall on a sidewalk or our private road or in one of our parks, then we could potentially be liable. All of those homeowners are liable. So, not against the man's business. I don't know him in support of his business in general, but in the community of Radiant Lake, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. Is there similar?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good.
What's that?
I said it's good.
Okay. So with that, we'll close.
Rebuttal.
Close the public comment and open it up for rebuttal.
That's you, Mr. Scruggs, if you'd like to do any rebuttal.
Well, addressing Mr. Ward's concerns, I get it. But anybody visiting in Radiant Lake could slip and fall on the sidewalk or in the park. As far as liability goes, once I get my FFL license, I have to carry liability insurance, which, protects me and anything that was to happen. Like I said, it's a part-time thing. If all of a sudden, my business did grow to whatever, which I don't want that, I don't expect that, then I would have to obviously move to a commercial off-site place. But right now, it's just a part-time thing. I'm just here to try to get my FFL license, and this is the only avenue I have. I don't really plan on advertising that much, and if people call me and stuff, I have the right to deny them. No, I'm not gonna work on your gun. No, don't come over. Like I said, my main focus is to go out, try to purchase broken firearms that need to be restored, maybe malfunction, and at a good price, fix them and turn around and sell them online for a profit.
No plans of a 240 Bravo or
No, nothing like that. If you have one, you're welcome to bring it over.
Can I ask one question
I
for
will.
clarification? So, Mr. Scruggs says that there's, it's going to be his thing, but if the usage changes where that becomes an increased presence of people, vehicles, or otherwise, how does the conditional use permit change from that point? That, he's saying I only have this, but it morphs into something more that creates more of a presence in that community.
what does the city do about that then?
I believe that's handled in your HOA
No,
rules.
it's also gonna be handled here. Complaints or somebody operating outside the constraints of their CUP gets the CUP revoked. Right? It's a conditional use.
And it's a
We give them-
permit.
And it's a
Be
permit, so
revoked.
if they don't maintain their terms of it, it can be rescinded.
So if you see something that you might think is not code compliant, you can report it to planning and we can go and do code enforcement check and make sure it's compliant. But we won't actively go out there and be checking on it. You'd have to
Right.
bring said complaint
Right.
to us.
So is there other conditional use permits within that private community that are already there?
I don't know. I looked at this specific property
Right.
for the purposes of this. I didn't search every property within Radiant Lake to see if there had been applications or uses under a conditional use permit.
Oh.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And we can deliberate this now, since there's nothing else. Open doc.
Actually, it falls all within the city code. We don't enforce our HOA. By all rights and means, it meets the city code.
I agree. I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend to the city council that the proposal be approved, finding that it is in accord with the City of Rathdrum Comprehensive Plan and Rathdrum City Code is discussed within the staff report for this proposal. Do I need to continue? No? Okay.
I move to second. In favor.
Roll call vote. Nina?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
And Larry?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, number 9, new business, action item. Discussion on the review of the comprehensive plan specific to Idaho Code, section 67-6508, subsection C.
So, on the March 9th city council meeting, Councilor Hill, somebody requested to add an action item to the city council's agenda to discuss the legal compliance of our comp plan in regards specifically to the school facilities and transportation subsection of Idaho Code 67-6508 in the subsection C. So I did a legal analysis for him, and I kind of summarized it in the Exhibit A on your guys' memo, and I found, yes, it is in compliance. Currently, our comp plan does not have anything for the schools because number one, they never submit anything to us to include, and number two, all we need is a little snippet that says why it's not in there, and we have that in there. And so we don't need to have it in compliance. And you guys passed, planning and zoning passed it, city council passed it like that is. It was reviewed by attorneys, everyone found it was already in compliance. So it currently is in compliance with the code. Like I said, it does not have anything relating to the school facilities specifically. It does mention schools in there probably half a dozen times, so it is taking schools into account. We reached back out to the schools in response to Councilman Hill's request. They did send us the last page of your little memo I gave you, a little narrative, and they said to refer to their long-range facilities plan that they created in 2019. It's a 104-page document that's already a public document. And so they had us refer to that and said if we wanted to have that plan into our comp plan along with this narrative, we could do that. That would be okay by them. So the council, at the last, it wasn't the last meeting, so the last March meeting, they did make a motion to direct the commission, to direct you, and I put the verbatim of that motion here from the minutes, that they wanted to direct planning and zoning to review and recommend any changes to the city comprehensive plan with the specific and narrow scope provided by Idaho Code 67-6508C to include but not limited to the documents and information received by the city from the school district. So like I said, the school district gave us this one-page narrative plus that 104-page schools facilities document from 2019, so 3 years old. But they're working on another one that hopefully will be done next year. But anyway, So the council would like you guys to consider doing an amendment to the comp plan, to add that documentation into the comp plan. I put in your memo, I started at the bottom of page 1 and goes to page 2, kind of your options potentially for moving forward. Staff just needs direction if you want us to set a public hearing now to do this, or we are planning already to do an amendment to the comp plan later this summer when the transportation plan is done. We could do it concurrently with that and consider doing the school. You guys can consider adding the school facilities information, then review it, see if you want to add it, and we can kind of do a concurrent public hearing with the transportation. And that allows us to just do one public hearing, one set of notices, and you guys can kind of focus all on the comp plan amendments all at once. So your guys' option, we'll just receive your direction. If you have any questions.
When does the school plan on doing something or revising in 2019?
I believe they're just putting the committee together to do a new facilities plan potentially next year is their idea. But it'll take them probably about a year to do. And potentially you guys could choose to adopt this one for now, and then when they do their one next year, you know, it could be a new adoption next year, or maybe you decide that this data is old and you want to just leave our comp plan as it is and wait until you get a new one out. It's totally up to you if you choose to do a public hearing and go through that analysis on whether you want to amend it or not. This decision is just, do you want to consider that amendment at your next meeting in May, or do you want to push that until we do the transportation plan? That's kind of the decision tonight.
I think we push it.
Same time.
So if you want it, someone, there's number 2 would be a good motion to think about making on page 2 there.
I make a motion to move to table this matter until we do the transportation plan.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Anna, thank you.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So we'll just let council know that you guys have decided to do it with the transportation plan, and we'll plan to do a concurrent public hearing at that time and present all that information to you guys for one amendment. Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Will you let the school know they have time to get a plan together?
Yes, we will let them know of your decision as well. I'm not optimistic that they will get you any additional information, so don't hold your breath on that, but we can ask for more updated information as well from them.
But just reading the last paragraph of that, if it exceeds, what is it, 1.5% growth?
1.5.
I believe we're at what, 15?
Recording in progress. This page to us last month in March, so that was a March narrative that they gave us. It's interesting. So, okay, so that action item's over. Thank you.
Okay, so if I can get a motion to adjourn the meeting, we got nothing else on the agenda, and we'll start our second meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Aye, second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Our guests still on the lobby, are they? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just like to keep it quiet because I know this is online and I want to make sure to hear all this.
I'll go shoot. Mary, what's the second meeting?
Whenever you're ready to start the next one, feel free to start it, John.
I call this meeting to order. Let's start, let's go.
Special meeting of the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee.
How do I say it all?
Say it yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Mary.
Thank you.
We'll now start our second meeting for the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee. Can you hear me, sir? Fire Chief?
You might be muted.
He's muted.
Can you hear me, Chief?
I don't think so.
What does AED stand for, Chief?
Can you guys hear us?
Not terribly well, no.
We can hear you, Ann. Thank you.
Oh,
Are you
because
ready?
we're supposed to use like the big microphone, aren't we, for that? Oh.
Good evening, everybody. I can hear you too. This is Pat Riley.
This is Bill Keeley, I can hear you as well.
We're good. We can hear you too.
Can you hear me?
So are you ready for me to start, or?
Not quite, Ann. Let's get through the beginning of the meeting agenda, and then we'll get to your presentation. You can probably skip Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, we've said the Pledge of Allegiance.
We can do roll call though, make sure.
Um,
Because we need, is Chris here?
Well, Chris is not here yet.
She's not via Zoom, I thought she was part of via Zoom.
Okay.
Chris didn't.
Let's go see if Chris is here first. Larry, don't go anywhere.
Why does he got a picture of a dog in the background? You should have like fire trucks or something.
We're Dalmatian, right?
Right?
Should you do a roll call as well when James gets back? Please. Thanks.
Well, I don't know who,
You just have to do
I'll
the.
do here,
Yeah,
and then you
and
do
Chris'
that.
story as
Okay.
well. Anything? Okay. Did she get the date? Okay, all right. Mary, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just gonna put 6 right here. Okay, so for our second meeting, I'll take another roll call. Okay, Nina?
Here.
Nick?
Present.
John?
Here.
Lacey? Here. Larry?
Present.
Thank you.
So I guess I can kind of start off since we're kind of just jumping straight down to new business. There's not really anything else going on. We received some requests from the Northern Lakes Fire District and the Kootenai County Kootenai Emergency Medical Services districts, those two districts, to potentially add impact fees for those two districts to our new development happening within the city of Rathdrum. And Ann Westcott is on Zoom, and she is with Galena Consulting. She's been the one that's kind of been the point person working with us. She got us all of the documents that were sent to you. I've reviewed most of them for the most part and made some changes, as you'll see in the agreements. We've done some changes, but I'm going to let her kind of present. And as you can see, Fire Chief Riley's here as well, so he can ask or answer any questions that you might have. And we'll just kind of go through this. What is in front of you or what you have to consider are kind of 3 things for each district. We have their capital improvement plan, which is the actual impact fee itself with the calculation that you guys will need to recommend to planning and zoning. We'll have the intergovernmental agreement between the districts and the city for the collection of this impact fee, and then the ordinance as well to actually adopt the impact fee within the city code. So all 3 of those for both districts. The ordinance covers both districts together concurrently, but the other ones are separate documents. And so all 3 of those for each district will need to be recommended to planning and zoning. And once we get to planning and zoning, we'll do a public hearing there to recommend to council. And then Kevin actually had a little bit about impact fees that he was going to share before Ann gets started on her presentation. Oh, Kevin has a PowerPoint.
That's
Don't need your mouse.
Yeah, I need your mouse. I did ask you if you had a computer.
needs some edits to it, that's why I'm
It's
giving
only
you a
gonna
new
take like
version.
for the tree. You got a book on tape
Light
or
reading.
something. Could have made the type a little bit bigger for us older fellers.
Sorry, I can probably find you a magnifying glass somewhere.
Usually old people bring their glasses, just saying.
Just saying.
Some people were on the fence of whether they're coming or not.
So, good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Jump. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Rathdrum. I want to give a brief overview about impact fees. I have had the privilege of working with the Development Impact Fee Board for the last two updates that the City of Rathdrum has gone through. That was in 2011 and 2016. And at the last council meeting, the city council approved Mayor Holmes' request for appointment for planning and zoning members, all 5 of you, to be on the Development Impact Fee Board. Along with that, for continuity reasons, we also have Chris Story. Chris Story is the lone member remaining from our last Development Impact Fee group or board. We had 1 or 2 passed away, 1 moved out of town, and during our 2016 impact fee deliberations, 1 of the people on the panel actually resigned their role. So there's that. But again, I've been the main point of contact on behalf of the City of Rathdrum with regards to development impact fees. So I want to give just a brief overview about development impact fees. Let's see if I can figure out the clicker. All right, so please don't compare my PowerPoint presentation to James. I probably don't see any James.
Where's all the fancy smancy stuff?
I know, Larry, come on now. All right, so starting reading left to right, a couple of things. One, the state of Idaho has a statutory, basically an ordinance or part of their code that allows for a governmental agency to impose development impact fees with a city-adopted capital improvement program. With that said, and I'll be brief, keep in mind we're talking about a 4-page, 5-page, single-spaced document that lists all the requirements that we have to go through. City of Rathdrum has developed or adopted an ordinance. I've got the city code there, Title IX, Chapter 4, where we have are moving forward with the question of development impact fees. The adoption of this into the city code is a statutory requirement. We have obviously completed that. That document is fairly long, has definitions in it, has different rights of appeal, how we're to calculate our fees, naming of an impact fee review board, so on and so on and so on. I could be more than happy to go into more of that with you, but I'm going to try to get through this presentation fairly promptly. So with that said, the first thing we do when we look to create a capital improvement program is we get involved with master planning. Master planning in this case pertains to our transportation network and our parks network. So we adopt or try to aim for a certain level of service. Now, these are not apples to apples when it comes transportation to parks. Transportation, we look at setting an acceptable level of or time of delay for a vehicle to be delayed at an intersection or a roadway segment during a peak hour type traffic movement. Parks is much simpler. They simply say that we want 5 acres of park for every 1,000 people that we have in our community. So, moving forward and putting together a master plan, we are looking at a 20-year window. We've gone back, we've looked at what our historic growth rate is within the city. The last time we did this update, our 10 years prior to it, the growth rate that we used was 3.5% per year of growth. So in other words, our population would more or less double from what it was at the beginning of the, I guess, master planning to the 20-year program for that. So we do a couple of different things, and again, these are completely different. These are not apples to apples about how we do it, but understand that the ultimate goal is to create a capital improvement or a master plan so that we can move forward to establish a capital improvement program. For transportation, we inventory all of our roadway networks, document how many travel lanes we have in each direction, intersections, what we have for turn lanes, type of intersections, whether signalized, stop controlled, roundabout, what have you. Mainly we're looking at basically our hierarchy or more dominant roads such as like a Meyer Road or a Bakel Road, and not necessarily a pristine circle type of road. We populate or actually we input all this information, and we actually collect traffic counts to start our study. We populate a computer simulation model that actually we start putting cars on the road so that we can evaluate, hey, where are we at today at the start of our preparation of our master plan, so that we can identify what our level of services are. And again, that's an acceptable level of delay that we're looking at basically at an intersection approach. We then begin to populate within our growth area of where we anticipate people are going to live or move to town, so to speak, in the next 20 years. Now that's kind of a crystal ball activity, but it is based upon where's our infrastructure, where do we know development is occurring at, things along that nature. So we try to populate that. With that, we then run our computer simulation model and start looking at, hey, how's our roadway network performing? And with regards to performance, we're looking at level of service. You know, are we delayed at particular intersections? And the answer is always yes. If you were to do absolutely nothing, we are going to have unacceptable levels of service. So that's what we do on the transportation side. Now, the next step of that is, what do we do to correct those level of service deficiencies based upon future growth or added trips to the roadway? Do we add turn lanes at an intersection? Do we create a, build a stoplight? Do we build a multi-lane roundabout so we can get more cars or vehicles through an intersection or along a roadway segment? So with that, we start identifying projects. Moving on to parks, what we do on the park side is, again, the standard is 5 acres of parks for every 1,000 people. So if we had to start at 2016, if we were 7,500 people, we would need 7.5 times 5 acres. So we're talking 37.5 acres of parks that we would need today to be able to meet that standard. Now, again, we're talking about doubling the population in a 20-year growth window. So what does 15,000 people need for parks? Well, pretty easy. 15 times 5, pretty easy calculation there. We're going to need about 75 acres of parks. So we have to grow from where we are today to get up to that number, 75 acres. Our parks is a little bit easier. We try to balance the types and the size of parks that we have geographically. For instance, if we have Majestic Park, probably our next park is not going to necessarily be right next door to Majestic Park. We're probably going to look in other areas, such as the southwest part of Rathdrum or the northeast corner of Rathdrum, to where we put those types of parks. Where are we going to grow our park system so that we can expand as the city expands? So, now we're at the point where we are creating a capital improvement program. Once we've identified parks and how we're going to grow, moving back to transportation, how do we need to improve intersections? How do we need to improve roadway segments to be able to get to a level of service? And right now we're moving towards adopting a level of service D, where our last study we adopted a level of service C. So we're actually taking a step backwards on what we consider to be acceptable, but that is a very common trend for most municipalities that have development impact fees for transportation to adopt either a C or D. So once we get into the point where we know what our level of service is going to be, or I'm sorry, not our level of service, but what our capital improvement program is going to be able to achieve a level of service, we then have our consultant cost out those types of improvements. What does it cost to take a 2-lane roadway and make it 4 lanes? Or what does it take to add turn lanes or a multi-lane roundabout at an intersection? From that, we start getting to the point where we're ready to start coming up with impact fees. So we know at this point what our capital improvement program is. We have some costs that we associate with that. And we then know how many trips that we're adding by the increased population in that 20-year growth. So there's a calculation involved with that. But ultimately we get into the point where we are setting an impact fee for that. Now, we will identify all the capital improvement program for what's needed to be able to achieve that level of service. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to include all the costs associated with that. We're trying to set a development impact fee that is economically reasonable, but still trying to get into the, I guess, the general parameter that growth pays for growth. It does pay for itself to an extent, and that's the intent of what development impact fees are. Now, I'll move into the quick parts of the presentation. Our current impact fees that were adopted, keep in mind we are supposed to do inflationary increases for our development impact fees. Our last one that we had was in 2021. So for every single family home or new building permit that comes in, and we collect all of our impact fees when building permits are issued, is just under $1,500 per home. For non-residential use, and we're talking about, if we were to get a Wendy's in town, we would calculate how many trips are people coming to and from Wendy's, and we would come up with how many trips that is, and we would multiply that by roughly $35 per trip, and that would be their impact fee that they would pay at the time that they were, seeking to obtain a building permit. For parks, every new single family home that comes in online, we collect basically $1,365. Now, next to that is a 0 for all non-residential uses. And the reason why is non-residential uses means just exactly that. We're adding no residents, therefore we are adding no population. So there is no impact with a commercial development coming in that's going to raise the population. Therefore, there should be no expectation, because we don't want to double dip in that situation. There's, we're not going to create, residence fees and then actually do non-commercial fees for parks, or associated with parks as it comes to that. Same thing comes along with schools. We don't collect park impact fees for schools, so there's that. All right, so I will give you an example of what we do. So things about impact fees. I'm going to talk about how we, how impact fees are to be used. One, they must be for a capital improvement. So keep that in mind. We're not talking about maintenance of a roadway system or a parks needs a new coat of paint on a building. That is not the intent of what development impact fees are. It also cannot be used to correct any existing deficiencies. For parks, if they had less than 35 acres or 37.5 acres, they would identify that as a deficiency. We could not collect money for that. Same goes with the roadway network. If we are at an intersection that has a level of service D, when our accepted level of service was C, we couldn't collect development impact fees for that because the people that are moving in or the people that were already there, that was already a, quote, broken intersection because the level of service did not meet a standard. The other thing is the capital improvement has to be identified on our capital improvement list that is adopted by the city of Rathdrum. And the state statute says that we cannot exceed the amount identified within the CIP list for that. So in other words, and I've got a project here for you, and let's go through it, and hopefully this will make some sense. You're looking in the aerial photo there of ultimately what the intersection of Highway 53 and Meyer Road is going to look like. It's going to be a fully actuated traffic signal. We're hoping to have that here by the end of the month. That's still a little bit ambitious. What's that?
I thought the lights were here.
No, the poles are here, the signal cabinets have to go through an ITD inspection.
Great.
I'm getting off subject, so I apologize. But with that said, we added turn lanes. We, paved Meyer Road up to a certain point past the Lions Club. The construction cost for that is, we took it out to bid, had it publicly bid, was a little over $1 million. We spent $65,000 to buy additional right-of-way so that we could add those turn lanes. So in other words, we had to buy portions of people's property to be able to widen the roadway or the intersection at certain spots. We paid a little bit over $330,000 for an engineering design. And we paid a consultant $140,000 to inspect that or oversee the construction of that. Project's roughly $1.6 million for that intersection. In our impact fee, we have that intersection identified as $768,000. Now, it doesn't take, a very intelligent person to understand that, $768,000 is not equal to $1.6 million. We know that, okay? The intent of the development impact fee was to try to recapture a portion of what that expense is going to be. In our development impact fees, although we could include, some of these soft costs like engineering design, land acquisition, although that's not necessarily a soft cost. We could include those costs, but the only thing we have in our capital improvement program as far as costs are construction-related items. So, my point is that development impact fees are a tool, a partial funding source that we can use to pay for a portion of some of these major improvements that we need within the city of Rathdrum. Parks, this is the map I was telling you about. What Parks does is they take an inventory of, their big parks, their medium-sized parks, and their small parks. They draw a radius around those areas to figure out how many people would be, would treat that as a local destination or a park within their vicinity. And where they don't have, overlap of some of these circles or have voids in some of these areas, that's where they propose to loosely identify areas for some of these parks. And that's how they fill their need for development impact fees. Or, I'm sorry, that's how they create their capital improvement program. Parks uses, in, I've got the number here, they use $30,000 to acquire an acre of land. You and I know today, that's low. That's the reason why we go through this every 5 years. We update development impact fees. They also have a construction cost to develop a city park based upon what we build at Majestic Park. And that's roughly $62,000 per acre to create a park. We're talking about lights, ball fields. Out there we had a splash pad, parking lot, whatnot. So that is a brief overview of development impact fees. And I know I was probably a little long-winded at that, and it wasn't necessarily brief, but that is my spiel on development impact fees.
So that'll be helpful because we'll be talking about our city's development fees when we do the transportation plan later this summer. Obviously in front of you tonight are for the fire and emergency medical services impact fees, which would go to their capital improvements. So I think if Ann is still there, we can switch over to her and she can present on the two districts' impact fees, kind of similar to how Kevin just presented here. Ann?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All right. Thank you, Kevin. You've given such a great introduction. We'll just move right into the middle of this report so I don't have to explain those same things. So you have two reports in your packets, one for Northern Lakes and one for the EMS district. We'll start with the Northern Lakes report. I will just go through and we'll talk about the exhibits that are most important to understanding this process and how we calculated the fees. On page 7 of the Northern Lakes report, you'll see how we estimated what the growth would be within the district. And remembering that the Northern Lakes Fire District encompasses Hayden, Rathdrum, and quite a lot of the unincorporated area of the county as well. So in Exhibit 2.1 on page 7, you'll see that we've identified almost 40,000 people living in the district today, and we anticipate that another 15,000 will come in the next 10 years. And that tracks real closely to what Kevin was talking about, having seen a 3.5% growth in Rathdrum over the last several years. We are looking at continuing this 4%. And throughout Kootenai County, because we are doing these same studies for the county and for all of the fire districts, 40% is pretty much where our projections are coming in. But because we assess impact fees per household and per non-residential unit, on page 8, you'll see that we've converted this 15,000 new people into about 6,800 new households and about 2 million non-residential square feet. Of those 6,800 households, half of those are likely to be within Hayden. And then of the remaining 3,400, half of those in Rathdrum and the rest in the unincorporated area. If you go to section 3 on page 9 and 10, you'll see there's some data from the chief about the call volume that they have been experiencing. And on page on 10, exhibit 3.2, you'll see it helps us understand kind of the geographic demand that we have stations throughout the district. The growth is coming heavily around Rathdrum and Hayden, but also in the unincorporated area. So as Kevin was talking about level of service, the level of service for fire or EMS districts is the amount of response time. The response time in the Northern Lakes Fire District is about 11 minutes. Fewer minutes than that within Rathdrum and Hayden, and longer if you're going into the unincorporated counties. But as we're looking at where we anticipate growth to occur, we want to keep that 11-minute level of service constant, not decline because of growth. We're looking at the capital items that are going to be necessary for the district to continue that level of service. On page 11, you'll see a list of what the Northern Lakes Fire District currently has, capital-wise, stations, apparatus, and equipment, for about $25 million worth of capital that essentially lets them provide that 11-minute response. That is about $1,240 per household, those of you who already live within the district, and about 62 cents per non-resident square foot. We can't use those numbers as the impact fee, but I like to keep that in mind as we look at the impact fee calculation.
No, I think I'm gonna vote for Little.
Excuse me, is someone on the line? I will keep going. On Exhibit 3.4 on page 12 is really the most important part. It is the capital improvement plan that Kevin was discussing for the fire district. So when we look at the growth that we're projecting in the fire district, we've worked with the chief and with other stakeholder groups to identify them having a need for 2 new stations for growth. One of those they already have the land for, so the price is slightly less, coming in at $4 million. The other one they'll need to purchase land, $4.3 million. You'll see that both of those stations are entirely because of growth. They wouldn't build those if they weren't growing. And then you'll see that they'll need 2 engines, 2 water tenders, and a brush truck to be able to staff those 2 engines. They also have an additional ladder truck, but that ladder truck is not growth related. It's something they already needed. And Kevin said we can't use impact fees for a deficiency. We can't use impact fees to replace existing apparatus either. So you'll see those items are zeroed out for growth. So of the total $12.4 million 10-year list of capital in the fire district, $10.3 million of it is only needed because of growth. The other $2.1 million is what the existing taxpayers and future taxpayers are going to need to support. If you go to page 13, you'll see how we calculate the impact fee. $10.3 million worth of growth-related capital, broken out residential and non-residential, and then divided by 6,886 homes, and that's 2 million non-residential square feet. If every new home within the district, and that is Rathdrum, Hayden, and the unincorporated area, paid $1,302 at building permit, every non-residential square foot was 65 cents. They would have the $10.3 million over the 10 years to build and house apparatus into stations. I like that number because it's coming relatively close, independently calculated, to what all of you who already live in the district have essentially paid in over time. So we're not asking growth to pay more than their proportional share. So that was a very quick walkthrough of the methodology. Do you have any questions about how we derive that fee or what's on the CIP?
Jeez, will you scroll down just a little bit? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up.
She was going fast.
So the $12.40 per residential unit, 62 cents per non-res, that's what we already, that's what the.
That's essentially if I take the $25 million of what the district owns and I divide it by all the houses that are already here.
Okay.
Because what we don't want to do is ask development to pay. I have to make sure that it's there's some proportionate share, that we're not asking them to pay more than their share. So that's just kind of a double check that I do to get an idea of what everyone's already paid in to keep this 11-minute response. So that if we ask development to pay, if I were saying the fee should be $4,000, that wouldn't seem right. But the fact that it came in so close to what existing residents had paid in makes me feel that's a defensible number.
Is the 65 cents non-residential, does that matter whether it's commercial or industrial? It's just anything non-residential?
It's just, yes, there are, in some places we do break it out more, but we have to have data that shows every different kind of land use, how many times they call for fire. And essentially, fire is a response-based service. Any house, any non-residential. Also, if you had a fire call at a Walmart, for example, should that be industrial or should it be the person who lives in the house down the street? So in order to avoid errors and making too many assumptions, we aggregate it and essentially say built floor space regardless of what's going on inside, is what creates the need or the call for service for EMS and fire. Did that answer that question?
No. Let me ask you a different way. So for purposes of, say, a new commercial development seeking a permit, are they going to pay 65 cents per square foot? Or does that depend on the land use as to whether or not they're 65? Like, I get that it's kind of an average for purposes of this, but is there a difference when they're seeking that permit, if for a commercial or for a business or for
No, so
industrial?
it's all types of non-residential, whether it's an industrial or a retail or an office.
Okay, thank you.
You would have different fees for your transportation fees because we have different trip generation values for those, but we don't have different fees for emergency response because the different type of land use does not statistically provide more or less of a draw on fire and EMS services, unlike roads, which obviously do.
Okay, thank you. I understand that better now.
So is the 65 cents per square foot, is that land area or is that building area?
Just the built environment.
So say if they cover their property with asphalt, that's built area?
Just covering a property with asphalt wouldn't create really a demand for fire because there's nothing that's going to burn there. But if they build a building and there will be people in it, or in some agricultural uses, if they're building a building and they're storing seed in it, for example, that is going to create more demand on the fire district to respond.
I was just trying to differentiate what the square footage would be on there.
So if it were an office, it would just be the floor plan, the buildable area, square foot, same as, a Walmart or a small drive-through, just what actual, and those, their building permits are obviously based on assessed valuation, but also that square footage.
Okay.
You may have answered this. I have one more question. Is this the 1302 per residential, is that fire and EMS or just fire?
No, we're just looking at Northern Lakes right now, and in a minute I'll show you what we would add on to that for EMS.
I got a question. Why are you using a hard number instead of a percentage based on price or density?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the whole question. It's hard to hear.
Why are you using a hard number of 65 cents per square foot instead of a percentage based on density of area?
Can you give me an example?
For example, if you have 1 acre of land that's developed and it has 40 units on it, compared to 1 acre of land with 10 units on it.
Well, we would, remember if it's a unit, if it's a household unit, so you're either going to pay per household, or if it's a non-residential, you're paying by the square foot. So it doesn't matter how many acres, if there's 1 house or 10 houses, each house pays $1,302.
Right, I understand that. I guess if you put a hard number, it can't fluctuate with what's actually going on in the economy. So it stays stagnant until it gets changed.
We set this amount, and I think Kevin alluded to this, that your inflationary index, there's 2 ways that we combat this. One, we set this based on today's prices. Annually, the city decides if they're going to use the inflationary index to keep up with construction costs, because the cost of those stations might go up or potentially down. But the role of the Impact Fee Advisory Committee is also, when you meet every year, to look and see have enough things changed in the environment, in the assumptions that we used, that we need to update it. And by law, you have to update it every 5 years. So this is where you're going to see, where we made assumptions based on information in 2022. Growth can change, cost can change, land use patterns can change. And you are the group that we really look to provide that feedback to keep it relevant and kind of a living document.
I have a question. What factors are used to predict how much a county will grow? And I've kind of had this question throughout this whole presentation, but what are the main factors that are used to say, hey, we're projecting that this is how much it will grow? Are there like...
Excellent question. Thank you. So we use a variety of sources so that, and then we kind of aggregate them together to make sure that we're not being overly liberal or too conservative. We first start with census data, which is, backward looking. And if we looked at the census from 2010, it's not going to give us a very relevant projection of what's going to happen in Kootenai County in the next 5 years, for example. So we're really looking at the last 3 years of that census data. We pull all the data from the county assessor's office. We sort it by parcel so we know where all the buildable areas are in each district. We can identify what the potential for growth is over a certain period of time. We then take building permit data from each of the cities and the unincorporated county to show a trend of how many building permits are issued in each category per year. We utilize that data all together. And then we're also meeting before, we got to you, we have the fire district has an impact fee advisory committee as well, members of the development community, etc., who were also stress testing those numbers. So that's how we kind of arrived at the 40%. I think Timberlake Fire District is a little bit higher. They have more available land for large subdivisions at this point that are being platted. Certainly your area is one of the fastest growing areas.
Thank you.
So Lacey and Ann, if you don't mind me interrupting just briefly, on population projections, I know for the city of Rathdrum, we use a sole source. Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization has done a lot of, research with regards to growth rates, and they do it by community or by Rathdrum, by Hauser Lake, by Hayden, by Post Falls, within the various highway districts. We use that growth rate on all of our master plans. And the reason why is we want to be consistent. So this is probably one of those things that we will look at what Ann put in her report with regards to population growth and make sure it is consistent with what the KMPO has used. We just want to make sure that we're using the same document repeatedly so that there is consistency and there's no a potential for confusion or for someone to say, why did you use 4% growth here but only 3.5% here, or vice versa? So we'll make sure we take a look at that.
That's an excellent point. You jogged my memory that we did take the MPO's data as well from the county, also data from the Department of Labor and data for the Inland Northwest. So I think there were about 7 data sources, but certainly if the city of Rathdrum does not feel that they will see a 4% annual, that is good feedback for us to look at. The interesting thing about impact fees is once you create a relationship between a household and its proportional share of the amount of fire capital, you could grow faster than 4% and we would raise money faster and then we would update it and add more capital faster. Or you could grow at 2% and each house still would have the same proportional share. And one of the other ways I know the accuracy, where I can test the accuracy, is to look across the 20 or 30 fire districts that I have in the state of Idaho, for example. We do all of these studies independently, and all of them today are in the range of 2,000 to, well, I would say maybe 1,200 to 3,600. The smallest rural areas like Hauser Lake, 3,600 a house. The most urban areas like Rathdrum and Hayden, Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, so Post Falls, their fees are lower. Yours are lower in the 1,300 range. because there are more, it costs the same to build a station in Rathdrum as it does in Hauser. You're just dividing it by more people than we are in Hauser. So while I definitely understand the interest in the growth rate and the need to have it be consistent with your comp plan, these projections are aggregated. Again, we're using the whole district and not just the city of Rathdrum. Are you okay to go ahead to the EMS report? So on page 8, you will see, well, on page 7, you'll see that when we look at the population of the county as a whole, growing by almost 70,000 people over 10 years, and again, that's also about a 4% annual growth rate. There sometimes is a little bit overlap or underlap because there are some areas that aren't served, Denton Harrison, for example, so it's not exactly going to match what the MPO data is for the county because we're looking at who the district actually serves. But they're looking at about another 30,000 houses over the next 10 years and almost 5 million non-residential square feet. On page 10, you get an idea of how much infrastructure the EMS district has right now in order to provide their response times. It's about $13.5 million. And that means that every household in Kootenai County has already paid in about $164. So that amount corresponds with that $1,240 that one of you talked about earlier. So the total burden per fire and EMS in Rathdrum is $1,240 plus $164. But then we really look at what we're going to need in the EMS district in order to serve growth throughout the whole county, knowing that the EMS district basically provides the ambulances for each of the fire districts, not necessarily one per district, but where they are most needed to provide the best deployment. And then participates in the funding of the salary of the paramedics and firefighters. When we are looking at facilities, since EMS puts the ambulances in an existing station, they don't have separate EMS stations. You don't see any EMS stations under the facilities here. What you do see, one of the biggest challenges EMS has right now is that once the ambulance has finished a call, they have to come all the way back into the hospital to resupply with narcotics, etc. So what the EMS district is planning to do is to add on to their existing administration building on Celtis, about 1,000 square feet, to create a secure pharmaceutical dispensary so that those ambulances in the other end of the county don't need to come all the way before they can go back to be dispatched again. They also are planning to do some additional space for their shop storage. You'll see only 25% of that total cost, that total $4 million cost, is because of growth. The rest of it is they just have run out of space. They have an existing deficiency in their maintenance department right now. And then you'll see looking at call volume and then seeing where growth is and where the stress points are in the deployment system. 5 additional ambulances, a critical care ambulance, and a response vehicle. Those are the 3 pieces of apparatus that are included in the impact fee. And then down under the equipment, these are all things that are actually loaded on the ambulance, but because they last 10 years, they're impact fee eligible. So the EMS system has a $14.2 million capital improvement plan, but a lot of it is the non-growth portion of their vehicle maintenance facility, and then just replacing the 15 ambulances they have. Only $4.3 million of their total capital is growth eligible. And on page 12, you see we go through the same methodology. The $4.3 million divided by those 30,000 new houses and 5 million non-residential square feet. Each house then, each new house would pay $132 in addition to the $1,302 for fire. in addition to whatever City of Rathdrum is charging for transportation and parks. And then 7 cents per non-residential, which added to the 65, I believe it was. And I do want to, of course, remind us, we have Chief Keeley with EMS and Chief Riley with the Fire District. So specific questions about their deployment, they are certainly here to respond to.
We can table this and come back to our next one. Actually, it's just bitching names. I didn't have a question.
And I have a question. This is Emily. So we currently don't require the submittal of square footage for building permits in industrial and non-residential buildings. So how would you suppose that we calculate this impact fee if we're not requiring square footage or have no way to necessarily verify that we're being handed the correct square footage by a developer when we're making this calculation?
Wouldn't they have to tell you what the square footage is in order for you to get a valuation, or do you just take their word for the valuation?
That was my question. We don't ever see house plans. There's a margin.
But there's a margin of error though.
Doesn't see.
There's going to be a margin of error on plans potentially. So if we're wrong in our calculations when the final product gets done, how does that affect the city's liability as far as when we calculate impact fee based on square footage if the square footage ends up being differently?
We can definitely look into this more. I would say in the 20 years of doing this in Idaho, that has never been an issue. If it were an issue and we needed to, there needed to be a discrepancy that was adjusted, the ordinance, I think, sets forth a process with which to address a miscalculation.
Okay, that's what I'd be worried about. But if we can address that in the ordinance or the agreement or something, then that'd be fine.
I have a question. The Northern Lakes Fire District, didn't they just run a levy and it failed? When they, the things that they wanted to purchase with that levy, do they have any similarities with what you would use impact fees for? Or are they completely different? Or completely separate?
I'm sure if Chief Riley's still on, he might be able to answer that.
Riley? Yeah.
I'm on, but I'm sorry, the audio is not very good. Can somebody tell me what that question was?
On the top, does it have green on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Maybe. Okay. So my question is, a levy was just ran at the last election for the Northern Lakes Fire District and it failed. Are the things that were needed to be purchased and so forth, is it any different than what you would be using the impact fees for? So is the money, they're two separate things, but would they be, do they purchase the same things?
Yes, actually, make sure I'm not muted. In the simplest form, yes, they are intrinsically different. The levy was 100% as advertised for personnel and to put into service. These impact fees are, as you know, Ann and I believe it was Kevin had stated, those are for other purposes. So they're not the same in any capacity. I can't use, and nor can Chief Keeley use impact fees for personnel, and that's the impetus of what we ran that levy the levy campaign on. So no, they are not one and the same. Does that answer your question, or can I go further into detail? Because I can go all night.
Don't let him do that.
Do you guys have a question?
I don't.
No, I mean, that was a good question, but you'll notice on Ann, on her worksheet that she had, that she was, presenting those tables, none of those had personnel in there. So anything that they do when they come to hire new employees to, she's building fire stations or or a substation that would
Fire
house,
Yeah.
EMS. She's also buying ladder trucks or, fire trucks, fire engines. But the people that go and would work in those fire stations impact fees cannot be used to pay their wages.
So essentially, the levy was for personnel, and then the impact fees are for buildings and
Capital improvements.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Mr. Chairman, if I may? Can you hear me okay? I'd like to circle back to Emily's question. At the time of the application for permit, the city does know and is made aware of the square footage. We don't take people's words for it. We all probably know what that could lead to. It's not at the planning level, but at the building permitting once it's been run through its process. So while there could be a certain margin of error for that process, the city would be made aware of the footage because that's what the city's permitting off of.
Okay. I just do the documents, I don't deal with the plans, so that's why I have the question.
I typically don't either. I reached out to my district fire marshal, who I asked for a clarification on that because I think I know, but I would rather give fact than what I think I know.
Yeah.
So are we making a decision on this or a recommendation? What are we?
So what you guys will need to do is make a recommendation to planning and zoning, so to basically yourselves, but in the planning and zoning capacity, for the adoption of the capital improvement plans, the ones that Ann just went through, along with the 2 intergovernmental agreements that I've made some edits to. We could go through those as well if you guys still want to go through this, and then also the ordinance, which I've made a few edits and I gave you guys hard copies. I just got the ordinance this week, so I only was able to go through it quickly this week. However, we can do more rounds of edits at the P&Z level with the public hearing. So if you guys want to keep looking at it at the impact fee level, we can do that. You guys can feel good about it at the impact fee level and recommend to P&Z to hold the public hearing for adoption to them. Or we can table this and pick it up again next month in your impact fee capacity. It's kind of up to you how you would like to move forward.
Can I make a motion to recommend it to planning and zoning?
I second that.
Are you recommending the emergency impact fee, the fire district impact fee, both, and all the documents involved?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With the understanding that you would have more clarifications on the ordinance work after you've had more time with it.
Perfect. Roll call?
I have a question on the motion. Is that okay?
Yeah.
P&Z would still be able to potentially change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then when P&Z gets it, and they can recommend it with an amended version to council. So we can, it'll be a new step.
So your motion is to move to P&Z for final.
For public hearing.
Okay, P&Z for public hearing. Okay, and that was Lucy. And then Nina. Okay, so roll call vote. Nina?
Aye.
Nick?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion been carried. The Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee meeting is done after that, so if I can get a motion for adjournment.
A motion to adjourn.
I second that.
I third.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, chiefs.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
See ya.
I still want to know what the ladder truck's for.
Ladder truck?
Yeah.
I know we don't have anything that needs to go above that height.
Aren't our codes like 3 stories?
Ours are for that
When we do the
specific
minutes
reason,
for
we're
the
35
impact fee
feet.
committee, since there's
For
kind of 2
one,
separate
normally
action
it's
items,
35
we'll
feet
kind of
limit
run it
is
together
because
with
of
a
fire
joint
protection,
motion.
and sometimes it's for
For both.
air. So we can't be
Do you
two
understand what I'm
stories,
saying?
2 stories
Oh, so
high
the
if we're
EMT
too close to
and
the
the-
In the fire district, there's 2
Still-
separate